Hi, welcome to the Organization Root Administrator Internal Project Resource Deployments video session. Staffing organizations can deploy any type of resources in the internal projects: regular employees, contractor employees, vendor resources. Click on Internal Projects menu item to get to the user interface for managing the internal projects. Click on the Deployments link for a project to get to the user interface for internal project deployments. Let's take a look at the user interface. The top portion shows the details of the internal project. The bottom portion shows the resource deployments. As you see, a regular employee, a contractor employee, and a vendor resource are deployed in this project. Click on View link of a deployment, say for the regular employee deployment, to see the deployment details, including deployment start date and deployment end date. Notice the link, Disengage Prematurely, for the regular employee resource. Because of some reasons like resignation, absconding, unfortunate death, it might be required to disengage a resource before the deployment end date. But premature disengagement is not just about setting a disengagement date. Lots of data integrity like pending timesheet submission, engagement in other projects, etc., must be checked to set a feasible effective date for disengagement. WFMA does this complex check for the staffing organization root administrators. Click on the Disengage Prematurely link for the regular employee deployment. In the dialog box, Staffing Organization Root Administrator has to enter the reason for premature deployment. Following that, a premature disengagement date has to be entered by the Staffing Organization Root Administrator. An abrupt disengagement date may be rejected by WFMA. Inputting a disengagement date through trial and error method does not make sense also. In this context, WFMA helps the Staffing Organization Root Administrator by providing a suggestion on inputting a feasible disengagement date. WFMA performs a complex check on the current data state and integrity for the subject resource and figures out a date range for a feasible disengagement date. The suggestion is provided in red color. Also, it is very important for the Staffing Organization Root Administrator to read the note before confirming the premature disengagement. Upon setting a premature disengagement date, WFMA keeps track of it continuously. As soon as the disengagement date matches the current date, the deployment record shows up with a remark marked for expiry, and the record gets highlighted in red. Let's look into the vendor resource deployment record, which is highlighted in red and with a remark marked for expiry. Apart from premature disengagement, as explained earlier, there could be other reasons for a deployment to be marked for expiry, like the vendor resource might have been separated from the respective vendor, or the resource's deployment date is over, or the vendor contract for the vendor resource might have been expired. Whatever is the reason, WFMA keeps track of all the deployed resources in all the internal projects and in all the staffing organizations. Any deployment record meeting the marked for expiry criteria gets highlighted in red. The highlighted record draws the attention of the Staffing Organization Root Administrator, who can expire the deployment online by clicking the Expire link. If the resource deployment expiry task is set to automatic mode, the deployment will be expired automatically. Otherwise, the Staffing Organization Root Administrator can expire the deployment online by clicking the Expire link. Upon expiry, the resource gets disengaged from the project, and the disengaged column shows checked. Before applying the expire action, the disengagement date can be revised by the Staffing Organization Root Administrator by clicking the Disengage Prematurely link. Click on the Add button to get to the user interface for deploying a resource to the internal project. Any type of resource can be deployed by selecting the appropriate radio button. If resource type, Employee Regular, is selected, the Employees list box shows only the regular employees of the organization in the list. The Staffing Organization Root Administrator can select a specific regular employee from the list. While selecting a resource, the list box shows the bandwidth availability percentage of the resources in the list. Available bandwidth less than 100% means the resource is already deployed in some other projects, which consumed the resource's bandwidth, as per the bandwidth allocation percentage in those project deployments. However, bandwidth availability percentage is just an indication for the staffing organization HR and the resource, which guides the staffing organization route administrator to allocate bandwidth for the current deployment. But even if the cumulative bandwidth crosses 100%, WFMA allows the deployment. It's just a guideline for not crossing total allocation more than 100% as part of good HR practice. Notice that Contractor Contracts list box is disabled because a regular employee cannot have a contract, and thus for a regular employee resource, contract reference entry is irrelevant. If resource type Contractor Employee is selected, the Employees list box shows only the contractor employees of the organization in the list. The Staffing Organization Route Administrator can select a specific contractor employee from the list. Upon selecting a contractor employee, the Contractor Contracts list box shows only the contracts for the subject contractor employee. The Staffing Organization Route Administrator has to select a contractor contract for the contractor employee. Upon selecting a contractor contract, contract document reference, contract start date, contract end date, resource rate, resource OT rate, and rate unit from the contract get displayed. These rates become effective for the deployment. Staffing organization need not worry about the referring the physical contract and enter the values in the user interface, which is error-prone too. If resource type Vendor Resource is selected, the Vendor Resources list box gets enabled. Employee and contractor contracts are irrelevant for vendor resource deployment. The Vendor Resources list box shows only the vendor resources for whom contracts are made with all the vendors of the staffing organization. Notice that in the list, along with the vendor resources, corresponding vendor contract reference is shown. That means a vendor resource may be attached to more than one vendor contracts with different rates and other criteria. Upon selecting a vendor resource contractor combination, contract document reference, contract start date, contract end date, resource rate, resource OT rate, and rate unit from the contract get displayed. These rates become effective for the deployment. Staffing organization need not worry about the referring the physical contract and enter the values in the user interface, which is error-prone too. Fill in deployment start date, deployment end date, and allocation percent. Notice that upon filling in all the mandatory fields, the Submit button gets enabled. Click on the Submit button to create the deployment. Thank you. See you in the next video.